Tantor Audio, a division of recorded books, presents The Popes Against the Protestants, The Vatican and Evangelical Christianity in Fascist Italy, by Kevin Madigan, narrated by John Lee. Preface. In this book, I tell the story of Catholic resistance to Protestant and especially Anglo-American attempts to send missionaries, establish churches, and transplant evangelical Christianity to Italy. Even more precisely, it is a story of how Protestants did this in fascist Italy, that is, in an authoritarian and right-wing national ethnological regime that was, by and large, intolerant of much that America and Britain symbolized, and, religiously, all that the Reformed congregations represented. In short, this book treats the Vatican response to what it termed the Protestant invasion, or the Protestant danger, in the fascist period in Italy. I concentrate therefore on a period during which the Roman Curia was attempting to establish a new Catholic world, at the same time that, to the profound dismay of the Pope and the Vatican hierarchy, Anglo-American evangelical churches were trying to Protestantize that world. Church and state, joined politically in 1929, were generally united in what they opposed. As the historian John Davis has observed in The Jews of San Nicandro, while in many respects the objectives of the political movement that Mussolini had founded in 1919 were unclear, there was no uncertainty when it came to identifying its enemies. Quite true. While this story has not been ignored by scholars, mine is the first volume, I believe, to have benefited from the vast and rich resources of Vatican and Jesuit archives for this period, which were made available only in 2006. Because these archives hold documents corresponding to the pontificate of Pope Pius XI, my story will begin in 1922 and end in 1939. Fortunately, those are the years to which the anti-Protestant campaign largely corresponds, as the pressures of war and the priorities of a new pope moved to the fore in 1939. The approach I have adopted is basically chronological. Since neither the evangelical nor the Vatican campaign was static, but changed quickly in tactics over time, I have been able to link new themes with the chronology, and to mix narrative, description, and analysis in an effort to chart a rapidly developing interaction over time. Dominating all chapters is the Vatican confrontation with the evolving Protestant danger, the ambitions of the Pope to establish a confessional state, the tactics and legal thinking of his point man on Protestant affairs, Francesco Borgoncini Duca, the vast resources the Vatican brought to bear in suppressing the Protestants, the frustrations of the Vatican with governmental officials, as well as with their bishops and priests, and the remarkable resilience of the persecuted evangelical groups, which, though harassed, persecuted, and in some cases criminalized, outlasted all efforts to contain or suppress them. There are scores of interesting themes upon which I have not touched, and archival sources not used here. Limitations of time and space, as well as the overwhelming richness of the newly available archives themselves, suggested I not try to do more than was possible in a single book. My focus, again, is on the unfolding Protestant invasion and the campaign against it, organized from the Vatican. While many of the narratives I analyze involve ordinary parishioners, I view them, if critically, through the lens of documents produced by those sympathetic with the Pope's desire to neutralize the effectiveness of Protestant proselytizing. Much, much more can be done, though perhaps with sources different from those I have relied upon, on the regional and local effectiveness of the anti-Protestant campaign. In some cases, the paucity of archival materials on key aspects of the anti-Protestant campaign startled me. Though I had intended to say much about the role of Catholic action, one of the principal organs of Catholic resistance to evangelical missionizing, the Vatican archives contained relatively little about it. And though I spent time at the Institute for the History of Catholic Action, ISACEM, in Rome, the materials it has preserved for this topic were, by and large, ones I had already examined at the Vatican archives. This key dimension of the anti-Protestant campaign remains for other researchers to pursue, and I do hope some choose to do so. Because so much of the activity of Catholic action was organised locally, even if encouraged by the national offices, diocesan archives may bear more fruit than the Vatican's for a detailed study of its role and effectiveness. Here I do attempt to give a general picture of the efforts on the part of Catholic action against the Protestant campaign, one based on reports submitted by Catholic parishioners and prelates to several congregations at the Vatican, and to the powerful Jesuit Pietro Tacchi Venturi, in whose archives, and those of the Jesuits in Rome, they are now preserved. This picture, I stress, will leave to other scholars the important work of describing the work of Catholic action on a local and diocesan basis in the 1930s. In the course of my research at the Vatican Archive, I discovered material compiled by the Missionary Union of the Clergy. The material had to do with a vast plan, conceived in the late 1930s, when all previous efforts to inhibit proselytizing and conversion, and even to eradicate evangelical Christianity, had failed. The plan describes something like an ecclesiastical overlord, involving 44,000 priests going out, apostolic style, to preach the true gospel, and thus to push the evangelical occupier back and defeat evangelical Christianity. The plan involved rigorous educational preparation on Protestantism in such institutions as the Gregorianum, which had agreed to provide tuition. Because the Vatican archival materials on my subject ended in 1939, with the pontificate of Pius XI, I could not, even by examining other Roman and Italian archives, determine if the plan was ever implemented. I doubt it was, in part because of the pressures of looming war, as well as, perhaps, the priorities of a new pope. That said, I have written a chapter-length treatment of this vast and arduous plan. If other scholars could determine what, if anything, happened to this plan, they will have contributed an important chapter to this story. Because I could not tell how this chapter of history ended, I have consigned it to an appendix, though, in truth, the story it tells cannot, I think, be ignored. It expresses something about the seriousness of Vatican intentions when all else had failed. 2 more words about my hopes and intentions for this book. First, I stress that my focus, as a historian of Christianity, is on the Roman Curia's views of Protestant proselytizing, and on the motivations and means of suppressing it. I write here as a historian of Christianity. I encourage specialists in Italian Fascism, social scientists who have studied migration and conversion, and other scholars to address more fully the questions that lie outside my scope, and those of the archival materials and competence. To have attempted to address all questions would have meant that I had addressed none. Second, in part because these archival sources have not been studied, I chose to include much detail and narrative. I hope, nonetheless, that the forest will still be visible in the profusion of trees. In the preparation of the volume, I have benefited especially from the remarkable resources of the Vatican archives and the Jesuit archives in Rome. I thank their directors and staffs, as well as those of the many other archives from whose riches I have profited. The support of many friends and colleagues has been essential. I want specially to thank my friend, David Kurtzer, not only for his work on the Catholic Church and anti-Semitism, but also for his personal advice, support, and ongoing encouragement. It was he who suggested that I pursue this fascinating topic. My debt to him will be recognized in the echo of the title of this book to Professor Kurtzer's The Popes Against the Jews. I thank David and John Davis for their careful reading of an early draft. Their scrutiny of the manuscript saved me from many errors, and they both made many useful suggestions. If I could not follow up on all of their generous suggestions, it is only because of the limits to which I have just alluded. I am profoundly and gratefully indebted to my dear friend Dr. Roberto Benedetti, who, though busy with his own historical and editorial work, introduced me to archives and archivists, helped me locate key documents, and otherwise aided in locating the massive volume of primary research on which this book is based. I don't have the words to express my gratitude for his invaluable help and friendship. The support and feedback of friends Paolo Zanini, Raffaella Perin, Kevin Spicer, Robert Ventresca, Charles Gallagher, John Levin.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?